This is Extra Paycheck Podcast, episode number 78.
You're listening to Extra Paycheck Podcast, where you will learn how to build and grow your own successful online business. Now, here's your host, Alex Soul.
Welcome to yet another episode of Extra Paycheck Podcast. This is episode number 78, and today we've got a special guest for you. Her name is Fanny Slater. She is a cookbook author, an entrepreneur, a recipe developer, and a lot more. So, a lot of great stuff in today's episode. Enjoy it. Hi, Fanny, and welcome to the Extra Paycheck Podcast.
Hey, Alex. Thanks so much for having me.
Fanny, please tell us a little bit more about yourself and what is that you do as a business.
I would say everyone knows me, at least in my hometown, as the Rachel Ray girl. So I'm a cookbook author, a recipe developer, a food writer, and I like to do everything that has to do with food and sharing storytelling. And I am a published cookbook author as of March this year. So I won this Rachel Ray Great American Cookbook Competition about 3 years ago. And my cookbook just hit shelves all over the country in March. And so that's kind of the main focus right now is being a cookbook author and trying to promote the book wherever I can.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And Fanny, if the very first natural question here would be, how did you get into that at all? How did you get the idea of writing and publishing your own book?
Sure. Well, what's interesting about that is, before I even knew that there was going to be a Rachel Ray cookbook competition, it all came about in November. So it was towards the end of the year in 2013. And my boyfriend and I were talking about just goals for the upcoming year and not so much resolutions, but more, what do you see for yourself happening in the next year? And I had been doing catering, I had been doing food writing, and everything food-wise had been so successful for me. And I was, sharing all of my pictures and stories and recipes on social media, and that following was starting to grow. So I felt like the only next obvious step for someone who loves food but doesn't want to open a restaurant is write a cookbook. And I had mentioned that to my boyfriend. I said, I really think that I want to start thinking about maybe writing a cookbook in the next year. And about 2 weeks after that, I got a text from my grandmother, who will be 90 this year, and she watches the Rachel Ray Show every single day. And she sent me a text that said, Rachel Ray is holding a national cookbook competition, and I think you should enter. And it sort of all just fell into place from there. It was really, it was kismet, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. And could you tell us a little bit more about your book? What exactly is in it?
Sure. So the concept that I submitted for the competition, very lucky. They didn't really change my concept at all from what I originally brought to them. So originally it was called Taste Like Childhood, and it was all about taking all of the food moments and memories of my life, telling the story in sort of my own sarcastic, humorous storytelling tone, and then also finding my own way to put a spin on the recipe. And so that is the concept that I brought into the competition, and the grand prize, which is what I ended up winning, was a cookbook contract to be published under Rachel Ray Books. And we didn't end up naming the book Taste Like Childhood, but the concept they kept exactly the same. And they said, tell your stories, show your, funny, embarrassing pictures, and recreate these dishes. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the cookbook. And so I was very, very lucky that it really is sort of it's like a scrapbook of my life told through food.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. And I think, you're calling it a cookbook, and that's very interesting that it's not just, a bunch of recipes. It's actually a story.
Exactly. And I think that's what, I kind of thought to myself, well, from the perspective of someone who loves cookbooks, what do I enjoy the most sometimes about looking through recipes? And a lot of the time I really enjoy the stories behind the dishes. And for me, that was writing is such a big piece of who I am, as well as someone who loves to cook and loves to eat. So I thought, why don't I take this opportunity of writing a cookbook to not just share recipes, but also share stories. And throughout the competition, I did that. Every time I had the opportunity to present a dish, I would say, here's the backstory behind it. Because there was always a reason that I was motivated to make a certain thing. It was really never just off the cuff, I'm going to throw something together. There was always a reason I wanted to get in the kitchen and make something.
Mm-hmm. That sounds very interesting. And Fanny, tell us, before you started writing the book, what were you doing? Did you have a job? Were you doing something else as an entrepreneur? What was your story before the book?
Definitely, I was an entrepreneur for years, and it really was I was just trying to get my hands into the food scene in any way that I could without actually opening a restaurant. And for me, that was that was really the idea, is how can I be in the food industry, but without doing it in the way that everybody else does, which is starting a restaurant. And I just really have never had a drive to do that. The business end of it, it's long hours, it's hot, people are yelling. I think it ends up being so much more about the business than it does about the food. So I thought, well, how can I be an entrepreneur that shares food and shares stories, but kind of does it in her own way? So as far as sharing my actual food, I was a caterer for a while in my hometown here in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I started to do food writing as well. So I still do that and was writing for a lot of the publications. And in addition to that, I started getting into recipe development, which was so much fun because it was kind of like catering, except that I could make the food in my pajamas and then I got to eat it myself. So yeah, it was really I was a foodpreneur in every way that I possibly could be without actually opening a restaurant business.
Mm-hmm. And so you didn't have a job throughout those years?
I mean, it was self-employed. That was another part of it. I wanted to figure out how to be my own boss and make my own hours. And, the funny thing is you can either have a 9-to-5 job and a boss and your schedule is very sort of set in stone and it is what it is, or the opposite, which is a very chaotic schedule where there's no time frame. So if you want to get up and, watch Grey's Anatomy all day, you can do that. But you're the only person who is marketing your business, who's running your business, who's cleaning up after yourself. So you'll end up working a lot more hours than I think you would with a regular 9-to-5. But I love that because I wanted to make my own living in a way that wasn't a very sort of structured setting. So yes, technically I did have a job, but I would say it was all different types of freelance and entrepreneurial work. And, I just got by.
Well, that's totally different though than having a typical job, right? A regular job. And the reason why I asked you that, because a lot of people, they listen to this podcast, they read my blog, they ask me, and I often wonder as well, how can a person who's, most of us, we are taught to go to school and then get a stable job and work that 9-to-5 or 8-to-5, whatever that is, right?
Sure.
So I'm curious, what pushes a person, or what does the person think when they decide to not go the typical path that you're being taught since you're a little kid, that's the proper way to live your life, right?
Sure.
And yet you decided to not go that way and started doing something on your own. That's like super interesting. And this is why I always ask people, how did you get to that point? Because this is not a typical thing. Not many of us do that.
Definitely. And I'll say it wasn't so much that I was raised to, have a very structured lifestyle, because I think my parents were very encouraging of me doing whatever I wanted to do. And I was always the kid that whatever everybody else was doing, I wanted to do the opposite. So I think that they knew that whatever I ended up doing professionally would be untraditional in some sort. So they really never pushed me towards, I did go to college, obviously, and graduated and ended up doing a great job in my English classes and found a passion for writing. But before then, I had a really tough time in school. And I actually had taken about 1.5 years off from college, which my parents were okay with. I think they weren't really pushing me to do anything but just do what felt right for me. And so I was lucky to have very supportive parents in that way. But that was a big part of it, I think. And my parents also had a food business years ago, so I think they sort of understood my drive to be self-sufficient in that way through food. And they knew, that it takes a lot of work, and you have to sort of be every single part of the business. So that's definitely another reason why they supported that. But, if I hadn't had that support, I would have gone the exact same path, because that's just who I am. Some people like to kind of follow the lead and feel, sort of comforted in a more structured, formal profession or daily life, and I just can't stand that. I just can't. I can't be inside the box. It's got to be the other way around.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And once again, congrats on having such a great parents that encourage you and kind of help you out in a way, I guess, by, like, agree or not, but the fact that they were involved with food and stuff like that, it did inspire you on some level to get into that as well. Because you were open to these kind of concepts and these kind of things.
Exactly. Yeah, they had a very successful. My mom actually began this very, very successful brownie business in Philadelphia, and my dad joined on with her, and it just became, they were like food rock stars with this business, and I think seeing that growing up was really inspiring for me. And then sort of growing to love food and love cooking and having all the pieces kind of come together, I think they knew it was inevitable for me to do something with food, something with being in front of people. And it was just, so wonderful to have that encouragement. But like I said, that's just who I am. I can't imagine being any other way. And I think that the advice to people who want to branch off in that way, it's just listen to your heart. The only you can be you. So why do what everybody else is doing when you know that you're meant to go somewhere else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And Fanny, what was the hardest part about writing your book?
Measuring things. That was the hardest part, actually. I am not a professionally trained chef, so I am the type of person who, my dad really taught me to cook through tasting and smelling and seeing. And so that's how I cook today. I never follow recipes. I never really think to pick up a measuring spoon or a measuring cup. I do it all by the way that it feels. And so it was really hard to take, the 100 recipes that were going into the book. And instead of just being able to naturally throw them together, I would have to be jotting everything down and measuring everything. And so it was kind of taking it back to that place of, being structured and measuring things and being very specific about proportions. That's not really how I'm used to cooking. So, that was the most difficult part. But the rest of the process, the writing the stories, learning how to professionally format recipes, doing the photo shoot in New York and seeing a food stylist, prepare my food, all of that was like a dream come true.
Yeah, I could only imagine. And, I understand you fully because I like cooking. I don't cook that often, but I get this kind of not a craving, but this urge to cook from time to time, right? And I never follow recipes either. I'm like, buy a little bit of that, a little bit of that.
Exactly.
That could help. That's not going to ruin it. And it usually turns out just fine. And that's the way I like cooking as well.
Yeah,
So
I think that's what makes it relaxing, is sort of just throwing it all together. And even if I did like really, really try hard to measure everything and get it all done, by the end of it, I'd kind of congratulate myself. I'd sit down and eat whatever it was. And then I'd say, shoot, I didn't measure, like the end quantity before I sat down and ate a bowl of whatever that was. So you have to be constantly very conscious of what you're doing when you're recipe writing, because you have to make sure that it's very clear and very specific, because there are people out there that rely on, step-by-step recipes, and they have no idea that there is a huge difference between a tablespoon of, black pepper and a quarter of a teaspoon of black pepper. So you really got to be mindful when you're recipe writing. But it's still, it was fun. I mean, that was my job for like weeks on end, was just recipe testing and cooking. So it's definitely, it was a good time nonetheless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, Fanny. And so this book right now, this is where you concentrate most of your time, or is that your main thing?
I would say the book, it's more, I'm still trying to plan events. I did a big promotional push of events when the book first came out, and did sort of a book tour in the spring, and just went up and down the East Coast, back to Raleigh, where I'm originally from and my parents still live. Did a bunch of events there. Went up to New Jersey, where my dad's side of the family lives, and where my grandmother is, and did a lot of events for her so that she could come. And now I'm still working on promoting the book, but it's not as it's not taking as much of my time right now. I think there was kind of a lull towards the end of summertime. And now that we're getting back into the holiday season, I think, maybe a month or two from now, there's going to be another big promotional push because holidays are the perfect time to sell cookbooks. So I'll be back out there on the road and promoting the book. But right now, my main focus is recipe development and writing. That's how I'm spending my days right now.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And Fanny, talking about promotions and marketing, I'd like you to maybe share some tips. How have you been marketing that book? How have you been promoting it, setting up your events and so on?
Sure. I really just try to keep, as far as the events go, I sort of just like to think about the people who are reading the book and who are enjoying the book and who would come to an event that happen to live in the area. If you read the book, you're going to see how Fanny it is. And that's all about kind of humor and enjoying food and enjoying beer and enjoying friends and life. So, I've certainly done a couple of events at bookstores, but I like to really try to make the events fun and make them something that people would want to come to whether or not they've read the book. And that's how I have been sort of drawing people in is sort of taking exactly what's in the book and exactly what represents me, which again is just really having fun and enjoying life and trying to create events around that. So I'm a big fan of, supporting local. So I have hooked up with a lot of the local breweries around here and will connect with the food truck, and the food truck will make a dish from my cookbook. We'll connect with a local bookstore and have them come on site and sell books. So I'm trying to do events that are not typical. This is what it always comes back to. For me, it's whatever everybody else is doing, I'm trying to do something different. And for me, it's just all about having fun. So I'm thinking, if I'm doing 5 events in Wilmington, I want my friends to come to all 5 of them. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to make each one incredibly fun. It's not just going to be people standing in a line waiting to get a book. It's how can everyone really enjoy themselves and, hopefully at the end, purchase a book if they haven't already and go from there. But as far as online marketing, I focus a lot on social media. And I would say the biggest piece of advice, because I've answered this question a lot, I think a lot of people try to spread themselves out on too many platforms. And there's a lot of the platforms that I don't completely understand how they work. I don't have very big audiences on there. So I'm a huge fan of Gary Vaynerchuk, and he does such a good job of saying, you really have to pay respect to Twitter and to Snapchat and to Instagram and to Facebook, and make sure that whatever you do on each of those is specifically tailored for each of those audiences. And I agree with him. But for me, in the food industry, it's visual. People want visual and they don't want a lot of text. And so that's Instagram. So I focus all of my efforts towards Instagram and building my following there, as opposed to trying to, kind of spread myself out over all of these different platforms. So I really sort of pick one thing and focus really strongly on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I have a website that is around motorcycle, the motorcycle industry, right? Custom modified motorcycles. And I found through playing with all these social platforms that it would be great to be on all of them. But I found the same thing as you just mentioned. Since it is a very visual thing, it's mostly Instagram. That's where it's happening.
Definitely.
And it's super important to concentrate on the platform where you just mentioned your audience hangs out. There's no point doing tweets where most of the people who you're trying to target don't even know what Twitter is, right?
Exactly. I think I understand Instagram. I know how it works. I know the people who are following along and the people who I'm following. And so I sort of try to pay respect to Instagram in that sense. But it's sort of like my dad always taught me with marketing, instead of kind of doing something that's going after a general audience, pick a niche and then do one thing and do it really, really well. And so I'm kind of taking food and humor on the Instagram platform and just sticking with that and going towards that, and not really trying to focus my efforts on, how can I also reach the Twitter audience and the Facebook audience. I still use those platforms, but I don't focus on them nearly as much as I do with Instagram.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense. And I've seen that happen throughout so many different industries, where people would start a business or a website on, general industry, let's say cooking, versus someone who starts a business or a website in cooking, low calorie, gluten-free recipes, right?
Exactly.
This website, the second one, will succeed a lot faster. I'm not saying that the regular, just whole bunch of different recipe website will not succeed. But if it does, which is unlikely, but if it does, it'll take 5, 10, 15 years to get it there because it's just so broad and it's so hard to target a proper audience with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all about picking the one thing that you're really good at and then doing that thing better than anybody else.
There you go. That's the secret. All right, Penny. So since this is a show about mostly online business and online marketing, can you share some details of your online efforts? What kind of role does internet play in your business and promotion of your book as well? And all that jazz.
I think it's important, as far as getting people who don't know me to kind of be interested in what I'm doing. I think things, as small as like giveaways, or really, a lot of it is about connecting with the audience. I've found, I've like I said, I follow a lot of kind of food profiles on just on the internet, period. And I find that the more that they connect with you and ask you questions, the more you sort of have an interest back to them. So I think that that's really important, to focus your efforts on not just saying, not being one-sided, not saying, here's what I'm doing, hope you're watching, but here's what I'm doing, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that as well applies to pretty much any industry out there.
Sure.
You have to communicate with them. You have to provoke the conversation, and you have to stay in touch and let your audience tell their stories, so they feel like you're not just some big brand, but rather a human being behind that brand.
Exactly.
And Fanny, what about your website, your list building, all this kind of stuff? Are you doing that yourself, or you hired someone to help you with these online efforts?
I am doing it myself, but I am very lucky. Like I've mentioned, my dad has been in the marketing industry for 30 plus years, and so he has sort of been my unofficial business manager and marketing manager for as long as I have really decided to. When I started doing catering and started doing the food writing and the recipe development work, I really did need somebody to kind of just give me a hand up into that field and say, here's how to do it, here's how to not do it. And so I'm incredibly lucky that person happens to be my dad. So he has been really, really important in kind of just showing me how to manage certain aspects of my business. And so things as simple as he was the one to say, you really have to have a subscribe button on your website, as things that are as simple as that I never really occurred to me. And I'm just sort of lucky to have a marketing consultant right there at my fingertips, and have just learned so much from him. But if I didn't have that, I would have to be just researching it constantly, because, when you have your own business, you've got to be the person, especially if you can't really afford to be bringing other people on staff just yet, then you're the one who's got to do that work and who's got to do that research. And, I think if I didn't have my dad kind of giving me all of this wonderful advice, I would probably just be reading Gary Vaynerchuk's books back and backwards and forwards over and over, to just learn the things that I didn't already know. I mean, you don't just come into this world with all of that knowledge, but if you don't have it, you've got to make the time and the effort to learn how to do it.
Yeah, totally. And the online marketing gig is such it's an ever-changing thing. So you kind of obliged to constantly learn something new and to follow people like Gary Vee and many other influencers in that industry. But there's no way around it. You have to keep on learning, even if you've been doing that, well, like your dad, for, you said, 20 plus years. You still need to be learning, and I'm sure he's still learning every single day.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, there's always something new around the corner, and it's always, I think it's a good idea to kind of just take things on and give it a shot. And if it's something that doesn't work for you or for your audience, then, go back to what you were doing or do something else. But I think it's worth kind of trying out different methods and seeing what works best for you, because what works best for me might not work, the same way for you.
Of course, yeah. Of course. And Fanny, I know what's the next thing that you'll be learning online. Do you want to hear the answer?
Yes, I do.
DV. You're using the DV theme by Elegant Themes, right?
Yes.
and Divi just released the 3.0 today.
Yes.
Which looks incredible because now you could edit everything directly on your screen, like on the front end of your website, including
that's awesome.
colors, sizes, fonts, like anything and everything. So that's something that I think a lot of us who use Divi will be jumping on in the upcoming week or so.
Oh,
We'll be
definitely.
spending a lot of time.
I can't tell you like how big of a difference that made when I started using the Divi theme, because it really it was so customizable and so easy to use. That before, gosh, I felt like I was, spending way too much time trying to figure out things on my website because I was doing the whole thing myself, and it just made everything so much easier for me that there's certain marketing tactics that I will not pay for, and then some that if they make my life easier, like something like using elegant themes and having like such amazing customer service support that comes along with it, it's worth it all day long because you'll spend so much more of your time trying to Google it and figure out the answers yourself. Whereas if you're using a platform, like Divi and Elegant Themes, where you've got just so much great support out there, then it just makes your life so much easier. It's worth paying for all day long.
Yeah, totally. And honestly, I think what Elegant Themes charges, it's actually, I think it's too low.
Yeah, I agree.
I think they're underpricing them for what they offer.
I totally agree.
All right, so there is another hint for all the listeners, and I've been saying that to everyone who's asking me questions like, "Oh, do you know how to change this on a theme? Do you know how to disable that?" I don't go into it. I just tell people just get Divi. That's like the best thing you could have.
It's like having it's like having a website support team at your fingertips.
Yeah, it's really awesome. The best theme I have used in the past, 9 years almost. So, yeah, I really love it.
Absolutely.
All right, Fanny. So you're working on your book still right now. On promotions, and you're figuring out doing even more promotions for the upcoming, Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners because people gonna be going crazy cooking all kinds of stuff.
Of course.
But what is your plan for after that? Like, are you planning another book, or what do you see yourself doing in the near future? Let's say 1-2 years from now.
I don't know if another book is in store yet in the next year or two. It's funny because that's the number one question that I get is, and so, the book has been out for 6 months. So it pretty much just came out and I've been working on it for like 2.5 years. Yet the first question that everybody asks is, so is there another one coming? And I'm like, I'm just going to focus on this one first and see how it does and learn from it, and then take that and use that for something in the future. So I think that the second book is going to be more like 3 to 5 years down the road. But for now, I'd say the one aspect of my business that I'm focusing on, and I think it's because it's the one where I've had a lot of success and I'm also able to partner with other companies, is really the recipe development. And it's such a cool industry that I found because I can really work with anyone, anywhere. So I just, was working and am still working with a winery in Italy who's right outside of Venice. And they shipped me some of their amazing wines and I tasted them, and then I came up with recipes for them. And it's so cool because I was working with, I'd love to work with a big corporation and, kind of get a feel for all different types of businesses in this industry. But this was like a, husband and wife team, and the husband who produces the wine, every bottle passes through his hands and he, marks the number on the bottom of it. But they're these amazing wines. They just said, our focus is making the wine, marketing the wine, but people are always asking us, what do we eat with this wine? And we just don't really care or have the time to come up with an answer for that. And I'm like, cool, well, that's where I come in. And I love that I was able to do that with a company all the way, in Italy. And at the same time, there's also people that reach out to me locally. So in Raleigh, 2 hours away, for example, a hot sauce company reached out to me and said, we're going to send you some of our products and, see if you can come up with some stuff for us. And that's so fun because it just really allows me to flex my creativity, and it's different every time because, pairing a wine with a nice dish is very different than trying to incorporate, a hot sauce into a dish that you're making. So it really allows me to be creative in the kitchen. I get to do the photography myself. Occasionally I'll make videos for these companies. So it gives me an opportunity to be on camera. So it really kind of combines all of the different things that I love. So I see myself continuing that for sure for a while.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And see, one of the reasons I love doing these kind of interviews with people like yourself is that I learn of new things that I never imagined exist, like recipe development. Seriously.
Yeah, how cool is that? And even like things that are becoming very popular right now. So the Plated and Get Fresh and Blue Apron, all of these companies that do those packaged meals that come in a box and you get recipes for them. Somebody has to create those recipes. And so that industry is, that's where all of these recipe developers live. I mean, that's the idea is you get requirements like, either use my product or come up with a recipe for fall or come up with a recipe that someone can make in 20 minutes or less. And that's the challenge for me is to get to do that. And I have such a good time doing that because it's like, for my job, I'm literally getting to like cook and drink wine. I mean, like, how cool is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's really awesome to hear that you're doing something that you completely love and that every time you do it, you are having fun, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it's all about. And I did have many regular, 8 to 5, 9 to 5 jobs. I did that for years. And I think it was because I didn't know exactly how to pinpoint what I wanted to do yet. So in the meantime, I would kind of just do the food thing on the side. I would write, I would blog, I would cook. And I would just do that on the side, but full time, I've done like every job under the sun. I've worked in retail. I've worked in marketing. I've been, an administrative assistant in like every industry. And it was so unfulfilling for somebody who wanted to be cooking or in front of the camera to be sitting behind a desk all day, especially in a profession that doesn't really appeal to you. I mean, I did that for years and years and years until I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. So now the fact that I get to wake up and sometimes cook all day and drink wine and like that's my job for the day, like I couldn't be happier. And it's not about making a ton of money because when you work for yourself, you typically don't make a ton of money. But to have the freedom to wake up every day and do what you love and not have somebody telling you what to do, that pretty much makes it worth it.
Yeah, totally. It sure sounds like a dream, though.
Definitely, yeah. It's a good time.
All right, Fanny. So the next question is for you as a writer and not as a foodie, and that's a question that I get a lot as well because people are always telling me that they understand they need to create content for their website, for their blog, for their company, whatever that is, and a lot of people call themselves as bad writers or I suck at writing. I don't know how to write. So as a writer, what would be like your advice to those who understand they have to write, but they feel like they're really bad at it?
I think if there's something that you have to write, then, well, first of all, if it's your job and you really don't like it, then you probably shouldn't be doing it in the first place. But if you do have to write, this is a problem I run into occasionally with things, like even if it's food writing, which is, the two passions combined that I love so much. If you're not inspired to write, I don't think that means that you're not inspired, period. I think that maybe that just means you're having a little bit of a block. And the best advice that I would give is if you're in a situation where you have to write something, but you just feel like you can't, then close the computer and go do something else. And it will eventually come to you somewhere else. I think that the worst way to try to write is to sit in front of the computer and, you're almost just going to beat yourself up for why isn't anything coming to me? And it's like meditation. It's not like making an effort. It just has to kind of come naturally. And I feel like anytime that there's, a situation where I need to write or I have a deadline or I have something coming up, but I don't know what the hell I'm going to say, I'll just go and run, or I'll go and, grab some food or do something to get my mind off of whatever it is that I need to do. And as soon as I've stepped away and I let my brain kind of let go of it, it will eventually come. And I think that's the best advice for writers that I think a lot of writers know is it's not going to come if you're just sitting there staring at the screen, but it, sure as hell may come to you at 3 a.m. or, if you're out for a run or something and all you want to do is get back to your computer.
And this is why being an entrepreneur, self-employed is a great way to go about it, because if you don't have a job to be at 8 in the morning, and you get inspired at 3 a.m., you could get up and start writing.
Exactly.
Nobody's going to punish you for that.
Exactly. And I think that's just very much the difference, I think, between, I know a lot of people who just really enjoy having the structure of that type of job. And they love the fact that when 5 o'clock comes on a Friday, they know that they will not have to think about work for the rest of the week. Whereas I enjoy on like a Sunday, going to a coffee shop and sitting down and writing a blog post. And that's technically work for me. Anything that I do, whether it's social media, whatever it is, that never stops. Like it's always kind of there. And I think that people who are entrepreneurs and are doing what they love, while sure you might not be getting the steady paycheck that you want, at least you know that you are doing something that you love. And it doesn't matter if you are working at 3 a.m. or on a Sunday, because, it's what you love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And there's one point that I disagree with you a little bit is we all say that when people finish their job, when they leave work at 5 p.m., they don't think about their job anymore, right, until the next day or throughout the weekend. But I've thought a lot about it, and I remember the times when I had a job when I worked at the office, and it's actually not true. You think about all the drama in your office.
Right.
You think about the deadline that's in a week. It wasn't, it's not today, but it's in a week or in 2 weeks, and you're already behind or whatever the reason is. So I think subconsciously you still spend some time, thinking of your work stuff, of your job stuff.
Sure.
While when you're an entrepreneur, you spend even more time thinking about all those things, but you do it consciously, not subconsciously.
That's really true. That's very true. And I think when you're doing that, in a kind of conscious way, thinking about your job or whatever it is on the weekend, I think it also stresses you out less because you're not thinking maybe about something that doesn't feel fulfilling to you. But if it's something that you're doing that you really enjoy, you're going to want to put that. Like I never had any, I worked for financial advisors for a while, and I was like the marketing associate there. And while I enjoyed the people and the environment was great, the field, I had no interest in it whatsoever. So when I had to think about something that was coming up, it was much more stressful for me because I was thinking, how in the world am I going to do this? I don't know anything about this. And I don't really care. Whereas with food, if it's something that I don't know, I'm excited to get to the answer. I'm excited to get to the end of the project. So you're totally right. It's hard with either way. It's hard to kind of leave it all at the desk, but I think it's a much more conscious thing when you're self-employed.
Yeah, totally. And what's interesting, another thing you just mentioned right now, is when people ask me about to give them advice on the industry that they should start their business in, I often tell people to pick something that they're at least interested in, at least something that, because a lot of people tell you I'm not passionate about anything. I don't have like a big hobby. So I tell them, well, then think of something that interests you at least a little bit.
Exactly.
Because if you just go after a niche that's, that has a lot of money, for instance, if you go to university to study to become a lawyer and you hate law and you hate everything to do with papers and so on, you're going to do a really poor job and you're going to hate yourself for it, although the paycheck will be good.
Sure, exactly.
As long as you don't lose the job because you suck at it, right? But the same thing goes for business. I tell people, look, don't start a business in an industry that just has a lot of money and you have no interest in it whatsoever, because you're going to end up hating it and you're going to end up not making any money in that industry. Pick something that you at least like.
Exactly. And if there's something that you're even mildly passionate about or, mildly interested in, but it's something you can't get a profession in, then, it's okay to have a job and start that on the side until you have figured out what that other job is that's really right for you. But I totally agree. I think starting in an industry where you have no interest whatsoever, but, let's say you're just driven by money or where the job is located, you're sort of just setting yourself up for failure. I think whatever you do, you should be interested in it enough, even if it's just a passion that's kind of just sparked for you, see where that goes. And it may take years of doing jobs like that before something really clicks for you. But you see the difference between people who hate their jobs and people who really enjoy them, and people who are in between who say, look, it's just my job, but I feel like I'm really good at it and I'm proud of myself every day. And that's, that's important too.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. All right, Fanny. So the last question, I guess, for today's show would be, what is your most important tip, most important advice to beginner entrepreneurs, or maybe people who haven't started their venture yet, but they want to become entrepreneurs? What is that one thing that they should pay the most attention to?
Being yourself. That is the best piece of advice that my parents ever gave me when I was little. They would say, nobody else gets to be Fanny. And I think because of that, it drove me to kind of take every aspect of my personality, good or bad, and really, really just own it. And that helped to give me a confidence in who I was that I think would have made me, hopefully successful in any field that I got into. And it was because I kind of knew that I was the only person out there like this. And I think everybody should feel that way about themselves. And especially if you want to be an entrepreneur and you're the one who's the driving force, you really have to just own whatever it is, whatever it is, even if you are a shy person and that's your thing, own that. But I think that's the best advice I can give to anyone, period, for life, but especially to someone who is gonna, start a venture totally built around themselves, is just be exactly who you are. Don't apologize for it. Own it, be proud of it, and use that to your advantage, because every person has something different to offer, and I think you should really try to just put that front and center and say, here's who I am, and nobody else is like me.
Really awesome advice. And Fanny, out of 50 or so guests on the show, nobody has ever gave us this kind of advice. So once again, you're being Fanny.
Yeah, it's just, I couldn't do anything else even if I tried.
There you go. You found a way to give a very unique advice that nobody has given on the show yet. So thank you for that great advice. And Fanny, for people who want to buy your book or who want to get in touch with you, find out more about you, where should they go?
Everybody can go to fannyslater.com. So it's FANNYSLATER.com. And you can follow me on all the different social media platforms, but Instagram specifically, it's all just at Fanny Slater. And for purchasing the cookbook, just head straight to my website. And, there's a link for the cookbook. You can see where I'll be traveling around, where you can purchase the cookbook. You can order it on Amazon online, which is, the easiest way that people like to do the sort of one-stop shopping. But if you're in a bookstore, really in any city, in any town all across the country, keep an eye out for the book. It's called Orange, Lavender, and Figs.
All right. Thank you so much. Fanny, thank you for your advice, your tips, your stories, and thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Alex. It was fun.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Extra Paycheck Podcast. As usual, I will be putting up show notes page at extrapodcast.com/78. This is where you will be able to find other information on today's guests, and as well as links and other resources related to today's episode. Also, head over to extrapodcast.com/iTunes, where you will be able to subscribe to the show. Also, please do go ahead, leave a rating and a review for this podcast, which will help me tremendously. Thank you so much once again for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next Monday.